Hi, it's Friday. Welcome to another edition of the Zogby Report, real and unscripted, where, believe me, today is going to be real and it is going to be unscripted. Jared, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great, but I'm wondering what are we going to talk about?
Okay, well, this kind of popped into my head, and it seems to be interesting, just from the vantage point of a pollster. I learned over the years that many of my colleagues will poll all adults, in April, May, June, July, and then segue as you get into September and October into polling likely voters. And then they'll follow a trend line: who's ahead, who's behind, April, May, and June, and who's ahead and who's behind the closer you get to the election, drawing from two distinct samples. One is all adults, which has enough difference demographically and often ideologically and in terms of intent to turn out to vote than actual self-declared likely voters later on. So I wanted to take that on and take it on in a pure electoral sense here and ask the question, because we poll likely voters all year round so that we have apples and apples to compare all year round. How likely are today's self-declared likely voters to become likely voters in October and on November 5th? In other words, are there factors that could cause them to fall by the wayside and decide ultimately to not vote? How's that sound as a question?
I think it's a fascinating question.
Okay, so let me tell you what I've learned. There can be changes. To be sure, you do start out with about, let's say 85% of voters who are firmly committed, right? And who say, I'm going to vote for this guy, I'm going to vote for that guy, and I mainly am not likely to change, but they're still likely to vote. There's a dynamic that's right there, but there are also people who are less hotly committed to a candidate and or have decided to be undecided at this point in time, but are still self-described likely voters. They are just less likely to be firm in their belief that they're going to actually vote. And so the whole campaign, really, the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars are geared at persuading them to back our guy, but even more importantly, turn out to vote. And so I think, and I'll suggest, that this year is very volatile. That given the fact that you got two candidates that are really bashing each other, you have full disclosure, you're polling for Bobby Kennedy. You have a real third party candidate in the race, that there are many options available to people, not the least of which is to be a likely voter who decides I'm not going to vote in October. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head in about the simplest way you can. And that's a compliment, by the way, because this is a very complicated subject. I think you and I agree that, of course, you're in a better position to say this, having closely watched it over 40 years. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this.
No.
And it's not just the two candidates who hate each other's guts and hate each other's bases, and so much of that reflected in the landscape, which then opened the door to the third-party candidates, chiefly Kennedy, which then opens the door to the possibility that enough people get tired of that. It's a possibility. But that's just one dimension of it, because not only do we have that dynamic, but there is also the possibility of fatigue. And it's
Yes.
kind of going in the same line of thought of what I just said. How much can people really take? of the the digital coliseum. It's one thing when you were watching gladiators in ancient Rome, or it's one thing when you're watching uh, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. But this is our election. This is the office of the presidency, and it has just been so demoralized and downgraded to the absolute most base of human responses and human emotions. Of course, the listeners of our podcast know I fault the leadership of both parties for that. I do not think that you can put the blame on one party more than the other in that buildup of intensity towards hatred. But that's just one slice of the pie. Then we are amidst potentially many revolutions. I mean, first of all, the issues are so intense today. You have seen the backdrop to all of this. Apocalyptic thinking has become mainstream, right? It's reflected in our media, it's reflected in movies, it's reflected in popular culture. So there's that could feed into this. Does that drive people to turn out to vote? It very well could. Or does it drive people to say, I just lose faith? It very well could. Then continuing on, we have AI. And this is another potential game changer revolution. I mean, just look at the headlines. If you are a news junkie, like we are, an information junkie, you're looking at the headlines every day throughout the day. And I don't know about you, but I am convinced that the subject of AI has become more and more prominent, not just in the news, but in the headlines, in the top headlines. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But I do see a convergence of AI playing a role in the election. What exactly that role is, I don't know. But I did write about this back in 2020. I speculated the possibility of a deep fake. Now, of course, we have heard about this in the last year. There have been candidates. There have been heads of school districts and politicians who've had to step down or have had all kinds of controversy because of some kind of rogue deep fake. Whether that was, we don't. I actually haven't followed the news, those events closely to know what specifically triggered that. But I'm seeing the possibility of AI in one way or another being unleashed in this election. Of course, I'm talking about the October surprise. What would that do? Would that shake people's faith in the election? It certainly could. So what I have just summarized is a big, complicated, great unknown. And I just want full disclosure. I want to be clear, and that we are in a new kind of environment where it is like, imagine clay shooting, but with 10 machines throwing clays and trying to keep up with them. Or imagine a bunch of arsonists who set multiple fires and you have to go out and put those fires out. The analogy, of course, is being precise and accurate in putting those fires out and having the accuracy to hit those moving targets. That's what we're trying to do as pollsters in this ever-growing, complicated environment.
So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that there's going to be a significant drop-off in voter turnout come November. And I think for, the reasons that you mentioned, not the least of which is fatigue. But the other thing is that it is reported, on a daily and then a weekly basis with aggregation of numbers, that it's a close race. Nationally, some days Biden's up in certain polls, 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Many days Trump is up, by a similar amount here and there, an outlier. But the fundamentals are not changing. It's close, but it's not close between two beloved candidates. So when you look at the numbers, there's 5, 6, 7% who remain undecided, and I'm just not sure where they're going to go, and I'm just not sure, what's going to ultimately be the basis of their decision. The second thing is we look at matters of trust, and clearly the same numbers of Americans that don't trust Biden don't trust Donald Trump. Two different bases, but it's kind of a reminder of Trump versus Hillary Clinton in 2016. On the day people actually voted, 37% trusted Donald Trump to tell the truth, 36% trusted Hillary Clinton to tell the truth. Those numbers are even lower today for these two candidates. So where's the choice? Thirdly, and you're leading up to this, that there's always in the past the possibility of what we call a deus ex machina, a force from the outside, an October surprise, a major revelation, a guilty verdict, a huge event of some sort. And those sorts of things have worked in the past, but I think we're so locked in, not only with alternative realities, but with alternative facts, plus the fact that so many people don't trust either of these candidates, that a major event is just not likely to change things. It's going to be viewed through a partisan lens or a general distrustful lens by both sides for different reasons. And it's crazy. And so, let's go for a moment into territory that we'll be very careful about. There are third-party alternatives. And if the third-party alternative presents an option that is different, that is worthy of trust, they may pick up some extra votes. On the other hand, we did actually have a drop-off in turnout from the Obama years to the Clinton years back up to the Biden election. And I just, for a bunch of reasons, see a drop-off this time around.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll only just, I mainly want to ask a question. Who is in the best position to capitalize on understanding where voters really are? The thing about the DNC is they're so entrenched in a party ideology that, I personally think has gone off the track from what they used to stand for. One could argue that, of course, for the RNC as well, to which I would say yes, but Trump has really created a strong excitement within that base by positioning himself as kind of like Bill Clinton famously used to say, "I understand your pain," right? And he did it in that Clintonian, democratic, empathetic way, right? Even though he was Oxford educated, he convinced people, wow, that guy really understands my pain. The thing with Trump is he's mastered combining the anger and the rage with, I get you. I know the situation that you're in. They put you there. I'm going to get you out of there. And so I think in that sense, he has the edge. But at the same time, we've talked about the double haters, and we've talked about I've talked about the law of diminishing returns, that doing the same thing over and over at some point doesn't get you the same results, right? It's like doing the same workout, right? You have to have something new. And so that's where I say that the third party candidates, and particularly Kennedy, has this potential to seize upon that dynamic. So it goes back to my question: between now and the actual day in November when American voters cast their votes, who is going to be in the best strategic position to capitalize on understanding where Americans truly are, the critical mass of Americans, what they face, and how to communicate the understanding of where they're at, and to tell them, this is how I'm going to move you there. Who's in the best position? I don't have the answer yet, but that is the billion-dollar question.
It is, and it is a billion-dollar question. And so I would only check out by saying that there is no power of incumbency, at least yet. Biden should be in control of a message, but folks are just not feeling it. I will argue there has indeed been economic progress on a number of fronts. He's going directly to where he should be going, which is where the money is actually being spent in communities on real jobs in battleground states, but it's not being felt. I will also say that an advantage that Donald Trump has is that, in addition to what you point out, he has a certain gallows humor about him that people feel. The sense that we're all going to hell in a handbasket, and whether or not I can do anything about it, I certainly can be funny about it, and let's all laugh together.
Which was a problem that Republicans had for decades: stiffness, yes, and seriousness, right?
Exactly. This is a populism here. And then I would say that for Bobby Kennedy, there is the potential, obviously not only for his name, but the potential to touch different sides. And I don't mean different extremes. I mean also elements that are appealing to a Republican base, strong elements appealing to a younger and more Democratic base. But he's got to get on the ballot, and that's where I would leave it.
Yeah, I say let's just touch base on new things next week. So I'm signing out.
Okay, all right. I'll talk to you in a few minutes. Take care.
You got it.
Thanks.
Happy Memorial Weekend, everybody.
Yeah.